everybody to the June meeting of the Big Hole Watershed Committee. Thanks everyone for coming. We will start, as we always do, with a round of introductions so everyone knows who's in the room. I'm Pedro Marquez. I'm the Executive Director of the Big Hole Watershed Committee. Overview. Steve Lebeck with Butte and Area Sports.
Jenna Dillon with the Bureau of Mines and Geology.
Ann Hansen with the Bureau of Mines and Geology.
I'm Jim Hagan, Martha Rancher from Flint. Rudolph, resident Dillon. Mark Camby, Rancher Divide. Steve Peterson, Rancher up the Big Hole. Alan Schallenberger, retired Sheriff Dixie Schallenberger. Jeff Wolk, Glenn.
Caitlin Boren, Montana DNRC.
Ray Morris, Church Grant County. Andy Smith, Ranger. Our teamwork.
I am having wisdom.
Allison Allen, Big Hole Watershed Committee Conservation Phillips.
Report Programs Manager, BHWC.
I'm Hannah Olsen, Associate Director for the Big Hole Watershed Committee.
I'm Jim Olsen. I'm a fish biologist with Fish and Parks.
Just because you're on the bench doesn't mean you get away with not speaking.
Olsen Way sportsman landowner, Butte Melrose. Scott Reynolds, Fairmont Oxford. Greg Shellen, outfitter, Wise River. Dave Duffy from Butte.
Jill Duffy, Butte.
Eric Thorson, Sunrise Fly Shop. Pam Campbell, Rancher, Fairmont Life. Will Stein, Dewey, Montana. Tom Traps, Dewey, Montana.
Jared Payne, FWP.
Jed Bow, Butte, Montana.
John Craig, Divide.
Travis Thompson, Divide.
Alan Miller.
Butte.
Greg Jones, Ridgeline Outfitters.
Caitlin Cloy, FWP. Cass Kohler, FWP. Serena Kirkpatrick, Wise River. Caitlin Kirkpatrick, Wise River. Carrie Nichols, Wise River. Rowan McHugh, Wildlife Rocky Field Institute.
Anna Engelbert, Wild Rockies Field Institute. David Kaya, Murphy.
Eli Fine, also Murphy.
Taylor Ferguson, Wild Rocky Field Institute. Lindsay Falkenberg, Warpy. Jesse Coverly, Wild Rockies Field Institute.
Gavin Lauer, Twin Bridges.
Eric Elston, Rancher, Glenn.
Wade Fellon, outfitter, Wiser. Mark Crafty, down below the Hogsback Rancher.
Okay. Let's get started then. We'll start with hopefully a little bit of good news with precip and snowpack report by Caitlin.
The sign keeps coming around just in case anybody misses me.
Okay, we got it here. Anna, do you mind sharing it for the Zoom folks?
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin from DNRC. I'm taking over Matt Norberg's position. There's a lot more people here tonight than there was the first time I did this, so bear with me. Just to start out, snowpack in the Big Hole is currently 53% of NRCS median values, but the Hypsomni SWE value is 114%. Modeled snowpack based on the Hypsomni SWE indicates that lower elevation snowpack is gone for the season, but mid-range and high snowpack is average overall for medians. These are just some of the snow tell sites. We don't have very much snow to report right now, but we did see a little bit a couple days ago, which is awesome. This is the SWE graph right now, and as you can see, it's kind of, we don't have any more at this point in the year. or very little. This is that Hypsomni Swede chart. You can see we still, sorry, misspoke. We have a little bit at the higher elevations. We can go ahead and scroll down. This is precip for the year. We're sitting at 99% below median values. So we're doing good so far for the year. As far as flow and spring runoff, like I said last month, we had spring conditions that were low, showed really low temperatures, and that kept the big hole in ice conditions longer than normal. This transitioned fairly quickly at the end of April, which contributed to the lower elevation snowmelt that we saw and the high spike in flows at the end of April. I think runoff conditions are remaining right now in the tributaries and the main stem, especially in the upper reaches. But I think we have met peak runoff, and that happened around the beginning of June. We also had a bunch of early precipitation events, which have also contributed to spikes in the higher flows. And hopefully that will continue into July. These are just some of the sites on the big hole that we're most concerned with. Right now, the wisdom gauge is down. They have a nitrogen leak in their bubbler system, but I talked to them today and they're going to be replacing that. And it's a good time for something to go wrong because we got really good flows going on right now. As far as like stage, here's some more from Montana DNRC. Here's some more flows. We're doing really good. You can see where that spike in CFS went up at the beginning of June, and that's what we saw as large snowmelt and then little spikes of precip. As far as the 8 to 14 day outlook for temperature, we're going to be near normal or slightly above average. Precip is probably going to be above average, which is great. For the seasonal outlook, it looks like we're going to have equal chances of normal temperatures or slightly above average temperatures. And then precipitation is probably close to normal or above average. NOAA has sent out an alert for an El Nino advisory. There's a 55% chance right now that conditions of El Nino will remain through November and January. And furthermore, that's an 84% chance of exceeding moderate strength El Nino. And typically, based on what Matt Norberg historically says in the big hole, that means we're going to have warmer, drier winters. And that's about it for my report. Do you guys have any questions?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we're gonna do pretty much business as usual here. Well, there you go. Okay. Are you able to share that too? Or should I share it?
If you just pull up Zoom, I'll share it and then I'll share it. Yeah.
Excuse me. Again, y'all didn't hire a tech whiz to run this thing. Oh, maybe I'll just do it from here. How about that? Does that work? Not anymore. No, I'm gonna stop that sharing. All right, bear with me for a second, folks. Yeah, that's what this is.
You can see it.
I can see Zoom here. Yeah, hold on, let me just do the display. Just turned off by itself. Okay, that's what it should be. Good? Okay. Sorry, folks, we really try to be, keep the folks that are on Zoom that took time to be in the meeting, make sure that they're seeing the same thing. That takes some technological wizardry. Okay, so quick update from me. First and foremost, we have this amazing new member of our crew, Allison. So y'all take the time to get to know her and meet her. She's going to be with us here until October, mid-October. She lives in a nicer house than any of us because she's at the new Willow Creek acquisition to the Mount Hagen Game Range. When FWP acquired that property, there's a nice house on it. So we have a fisheries technician from FWP and Allison, and then occasionally Ben and I crashing into the spare bedroom. But it's been awesome. Allie's hitting the ground running. She's out in the field all the time. She's fearless and she's tons of fun. So get to know her. It's been great having you so far. And she's from Ohio, where everything is flat. So topography is just like amazing. And she's driven everywhere every weekend to just explore this place. Okay, on the drought management front, there's obviously been a lot going on, and we will have a lot of discussion after Jim's presentation. It's because there's a lot of business to get through. And I know as soon as we pop that conversation cork, it's not putting that back. So bear with us while we get through all of the other things that the Watershed Committee does. As far as there's just been a lot of been out and about and doing a lot of outreach. One of the more exciting, as you all know, last year, we sort of took it upon ourselves to start tracking and monitoring flows on the Wise River. We set up a system of stream gauges, 2 tracks down the river. It's an important tributary. It's cold water. There's a lot of it. We want to really better understand where the water is going and where we can find some conservation benefits to keep that river pumping late season. In parallel to that, we secured funding and hired an engineer that's going to design new headgate infrastructure and measuring devices to go in on 3 main stem headgates. We're also doing 3 headgates on Jerry Creek, and then also looking down at a headgate down below Melrose, that double diversion that we've had an engineered fix for that for 10 years. And I think now we finally have what we need to get that project up and running. It's one of those that it's a diversion with a weir that really obstructs the river. And we've got a plan to redesign that to be less of a hazard to boaters and also ensure that the irrigators get the water that they have the rights to. So that's going on. The cool part about this is, Ben and I kind of took it on ourselves to go and do these measurements. We tried to play hydrologist for a while. We're not good at it, but we tried our best. We failed in a lot of ways. We didn't communicate well in some ways with local folks, but we did get enough good data and enough good momentum that partners at FWP and DNRC and sort of they're willing to take on what we started and keep running with this data collection effort. So I feel like it paid off, that we kind of got the ball rolling, got a lot of good cooperation and support from folks. And so that was good. I was a little nervous that we were doing all that for nothing, but I don't think so. There's still one temperature logger down in a super boggy spot. That might be a mission for Allison. I tried to go like last November, during hunting season, like going down to Willow Bottom, and I only had mud boots and, it was like up to here and I didn't feel like swimming, so I didn't get it. So it froze over. That's just the joys of trying to play hydrologist, right? But anyway, it paid off. This is just some of the data that Andy Brogan from FWP was able to put together for us. They'll make sense of it. Caitlin's on the team and Jim McGee and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is also on the case. So there's a good collective kind of push to see where we can make improvements in the Wise River. And as you all know, we're also doing the Elkhorn Superfund project. We've just gotten another influx of cash for that Superfund site. That's open. There's an open adit. There's orange water flowing into Elkhorn Creek up there and has been for 80 plus years. We're trying to get a handle on that as well. So kind of a comprehensive look at Wise Rivers is ongoing. I had a little bit of an interaction with folks doing beaver conflict mitigation. There's now 2 full-time employees, one with the Clark Fork Coalition, and one with Freshwater Partners that are dedicated solely to helping landowners deal with conflicts with beaver and ideally leading to non-lethal means of, getting them off the landscape. Currently, FWP does not have a methodology to relocate or translocate a beaver. It would require an environmental assessment per animal at this point, which is really not feasible when you're faced with an emergency kind of beaver clogging a headgate or something. So there's a bigger picture strategy in place that's going to take a couple of years to roll out. In the meantime, we were discussing a way to get conservation districts to streamline their ability to okay projects like the one Ben did down by Wise River, of doing either beaver deceivers like culvert fences and just trying to keep beaver out of places where we don't want them, and pond levelers where we can mitigate the level of the pond to
There, how you doing?
Did I get someone say something online? No.
Sorry, that might have been me. Yeah, unintentional. My apologies.
No worries, Jim. Okay, so we did that. We hosted a team from the PERC, the Property and Environment Research Council. Might have gotten that wrong, the acronym. They are a, private property rights and market-based solutions think tank. So looking at ways that the private marketplace and can create incentives for conservation. They've done a lot of work around wildlife conflict, corridors, fire suppression, and things like that. Their capacity has grown tremendously. They've testified in Washington, D.C. over a number of things, and they expressed some interest in what's going on here in the Big Hole and seeing if some of the ideas that they toy around with could apply to some of the conflicts and difficulties we're having down here with water and species and all of that. So we had a great meeting with them. Some of our board members were gracious enough with their time to come and meet. Had a good discussion, so I'm going to kind of keep that going. We hosted the Vital Ground Foundation on their annual board visit. They stayed at the Complete Fly Fisher, and we were able to give them a tour, some of the restoration work that we were doing. And they've been funders of ours for our wildlife conflict projects. So Tana and I had a great visit with them. She might talk a little bit more about that. Also, this carnivore conflict prevention workshop that happened. I'll let Tana talk about that one. When was it? Was it last week? My days are blurring together. We hosted the review panel for the Future Fisheries grant program. The entire review panel came out. They're very curious to see in action a lot of the projects and techniques that they fund. And, since we've done a whole lot of projects and have a lot of history of this stuff, they felt like the Big Hole would be a great place to really see what this stuff looks like on the ground. So we had a great visit with them. Jim showed them around to the Bryant Creek Fish Barrier, and then we showed them a bunch of our projects up in Mount Hagen. And then the following day, Ben presented to the same panel for project work. I think you're covering that. Okay. We also, as you all know, Ben and I are because of our expertise with the Mount Hagen uplands and the Superfund site, which was checked off by EPA a couple months ago. So basically EPA said there's no more contaminated sediment coming out of the Mount Hagen game range. They have checked the site off, and we're now basically in the hands of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for long-term management and operations on that site. We're having a little celebration of that work tomorrow at the Sugarloaf Lodge tomorrow afternoon, taking some of the folks that have been involved with this project for a dozen years around. So that'll be kind of fun, a little bit of a celebration. Because of that expertise, there's money now in Anaconda County to restore degraded lands, county-owned lands. And they've asked Ben and I to help kind of design what restoration might look like on those lands. So we're spending a little bit of time over there lending our expertise. So we had a field day out around in the A&C hills around Anaconda. And then lastly, Ben and I have spent 2 days with the Wild Rockies Field Institute folks. Been great. They did a bunch of work. They're learning a lot. This was a partnership that started last year when the Wild Rockies Field Institute program got flooded out of Yellowstone, and they needed a place to learn about restoration. So they contacted us, had a great time. So we've got this crew now, and we'll have another crew, I think, in August coming to visit with us. So this kind of stuff, I really enjoy it. I really love showing off the work that we've done, the lessons we've learned, and then sort of just giving the next generation kind of a leg up on this type of work and conservation. And their timing was perfect. So they could be here and see what it's all about, how this work is done face to face. And our newsletter's coming out soon. And that's all I got. Get it in the mail soon.
We might get you in
Oh, okay, and it went out yesterday. So you'll be getting it in the mail and we'll probably send it out online. Any questions for me for right now? Awesome, great. Steering committee, right? Steering committee, we have a volunteer. There's nothing going on. Okay, the news is good news. We're gonna meet towards the end of this month. We'll get something scheduled. Turns out it's really hard to find a time when 4 people can meet in a room. Especially busy people. Okay, nothing from steering committee. Wildlife. You gonna do anything?
you ruined 2 meals. You all that supper. When did I ever have shit? I could have written symphonies or written Shakespeare. Yeah, have a big frosty motherfucker.
Sorry, folks. So the state drought management plan update, mtdroughtinfo.org. Highly recommend you guys check it out. I'll be kind of corralling the governing board as well on the same subject and see if the committee would like to have a kind of unified comment. Otherwise, everyone comment on your own. So we'll be going down that road. Okay, that's it for me. We got a couple additional items. Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Pedro. Some of you guys know me, some of you probably don't. Jared used to be the riparian ecologist for the CCAA program up at Big Hole. In January, I moved into a new position with FWP. And so I'm not working in wildlife, but what I'm here to actually do is I'd like to introduce the new riparian ecologist. In the last 6 months, Cassandra and I have been running the program from the FWP side, but I'd like to welcome Caitlin Coy. She will be joining us. She's the new ecologist, and so she'll be running the CCAA program. And I just kind of wanted to say too, just as a brief update, we also have Caitlin with DNRC, and we have to refer to them as FWP Caitlin and DNRC Caitlin to keep them straight. But as far as the team goes, we're fully staffed. We still have as much support as we ever had. Everything is plowing forward, and we have some new faces, but we also have the folks that have been a big part of it, which is like Jim McGee. And then myself, I'm still in Dillon, still working here, just more on a statewide basis, doing the same work, but I'm going to be able to still help and kind of get this team jump started and do good work. So anyways, I just wanted to give you all that update.
Anybody else? Additional items?
So,
Oh, you got to.
oh, the thing I want to talk about, I'd like to bring up at the end of the meeting.
Okay, perfect. And I'm gonna have to ask you to use this thing. I know, because you guys, your friends on the Zoom. You got friends on the Zoom that want to hear what you got to say. All right, folks, so here is Jim Olsen that most of you already know. He's going to talk to us about fisheries numbers that are maybe not a surprise to most, but let's hear the details and then we can have some discussions about some proposals that are on the table.
Thanks, Pedro. So a lot of you have seen or heard about what's going on in the Big Hole as far as total trout numbers and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go through what our data, what we have from this spring, and do it fairly quickly, but then talk about our management plan and where that's at that we proposed last year. And then also the things that we're planning to do to help us figure out what's going on and hopefully better manage the fishery in the Big Hole. So I'll just jump right into the data. Well, first, as most of you know, our fish numbers are down, but there's some really nice fish around in the river, and the condition of the fish that are there is really, really good. We don't take very good pictures. Both those fish are almost 7 pounds, like 26 inches long. They came out of the same run. I don't take very good pictures of the fish, apparently. They all look little. So according to our draft management plan, which will be out for review in August, we divided the river up into 3 management sections. So the headwaters to Dickey Bridge, we manage primarily for grayling. And then from Dickey down to the mouth, we manage for browns and rainbows primarily. And we divided that stretch up into 2 reaches. So from Dickey to Browns Bridge is the upper reach, and then from Browns Bridge to the confluence with the beaverheads, the lower reach. And we monitor 4 population sections within that. These are our electrofishing sections, so we do marker capture population estimates in these sections. According to our management plan, we will conduct population estimates every year in the Melrose section, which is between Melrose and Browns Bridge, and in our hogback section, which is between Glen and Tony Showman fishing access sites. And then every other year, we monitor the population at Jerry Creek. So from Jerry Creek down to George Grant fishing access, and then the lower reach, which is our Pennington section, which is between Pennington and the High Road Bridge. So this year we monitored Jerry Creek, Melrose, and the hogback section. So I'm going to go through the data, what those look like. Historically, Jerry Creek has been dominated by rainbow trout, so our brown trout data is not as extensive as it is in some of our other areas, but every one of these graphs is going to look the same. For those of you who've been to lots of these meetings, it's the same format. there's two bars side by side for each other. The blue bar, the bar on the left is the density, so total number of fish per mile. And the bar on the right side is the total number of pounds of fish per mile. And so when those two bars are equal, the average fish weighs a pound, when the density and biomass are the same per mile. What you really need to know about this is in years where, and we'll show you data in a little bit, and it shows up here, where the blue bar is bigger than the red bar is generally a pretty good year for little fish. And so we have a lot of smaller fish in that population. So the density exceeds what the biomass is. That means more of those fish are smaller. But historically, this section has been primarily as far as brown trout goes, a larger brown trout section. We don't see a lot of little brown trout. Like I said, it's historically been more of a rainbow trout section, but the trends we're seeing now in rainbows are tending to follow also what we're seeing in browns. So I'm just going to switch to the Melrose one. It's our longest data set that we have on the big hole. First population estimates are done in the late 60s in this reach. And you can see now this spring we're as low as we've ever been for total numbers of brown trout in this particular section. Although the last 2 years we have had a little bit of recruitment the years before, you can see the red bars are higher than the blue bars, which means we had very few juvenile fish. So thank you. But the last couple of years, we've had at least some recruitment, still below the long-term average of H2 fish. So I need to step back and talk about that too. So we don't begin our monitoring. We're able to monitor and capture efficiently enough to estimate H2 and above brown trout. So in the big hole, that's like 8 to 9 inches. From 8 to 9 inches to 12 inches is what an H2 fish is. So for the first 2 years of the brown trout's life, we don't monitor them. They're very difficult for us to capture, and they have a lot higher mortality rate during our capture events if we're doing that. So we do not even target them. They are there, but we don't try to catch them because we can't accurately estimate them. So we estimate fish starting at H2, so starting at 8 inches and up, basically. So that's what all these estimates are. They're all H2 and older. This last year too, we saw a pretty significant decline in rainbow. As you saw from before, the trajectory on brown trout has been steadily downward. Rainbows during that same period had been relatively flat in this section. But this last year, we did see a pretty good drop in the total rainbow trout population in that section, which then drops our total trout abundance quite a bit. But again, we still saw some juvenile fish, but just not as many bigger fish. So moving downriver in the hogback section, not a significant or not a substantial decline from last year to this year, but we're still down lower than we've ever been historically. That's for brown trout again. Rainbows are a slight decline this year, but overall, following that same sort of trend, following 2011, it's been just kind of a steady decline. I've said this several times before that rainbow trout in this section they trend very well with what's going on in the Jefferson rainbows. So as the Jefferson goes, so does the lower big hole as far as rainbow trout. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about what this means, and as far as our management goes, I shared these graphs last year. This is our proposed management plan for the big hole in this upper reach. So from Dickey Bridge to Browns Bridge, and we monitor again this site at Melrose. So each one of the dots is the total trout abundance. So adding brown trout and rainbow trout together, that's the total abundance of fish. And of course, we're down here just below 500 fish a mile total now in that section. And when we're in that red, the management plan calls for an emergency change in the fishing regulations to catch and release only, and a spawning closure from October 1 to April 1. And we're able to get that passed, which I'll talk about here in a minute. The commission did put that into effect. But that's where we're at. That's what our trend looks like. That's where we're at right now. And then for the lower section, we're also in the red. Smaller declines last year, but both when you add up the browns and the rainbows, it went from the yellow to the red. So also proposed a regulation change for this section to go to catch and release and also have a spawning closure from October 1 to April 1. In this section, we didn't propose any gear restrictions, but the commission passed those. So what went into effect as at the end of the commission meeting 2 weeks ago, the Fish and Wildlife Commission approved these emergency regulation changes. So it's the same for both of those sections. So from Dickey Bridge all the way to the mouth, it's catch and release now for all fish, not just trout. So it's all fish, it's catch and release only. And also they included on there to keep what our current regulation is, which is artificial lures only, single point hooks. So no treble or double hooks. So that was kept on there. We had proposed that not to be on there to the commission so that, which I'll talk about here in a second, as we move forward and go into some pretty significant and hopefully meaningful studies on the big hole, that we'd be able to better understand how gear affects fish mortality. Right now, the regulations are the same through both sections, so it's not set up so that we can understand if there are population or even individual differences in mortality to fish related to the type of gear that you're using. So we're hoping to be able to study that. So this is more what I wanted to talk about, which is where we're going as an agency for this. Most of you know, we've been trying to, through this proposed management plan, which we originally proposed to accompany that with a study to find out how effective it is at producing the kind of results we're hoping for as far as getting our fish back into that green level, back into that ideal density where we have a good balance between numbers and available resources to produce a quality fishery. And so it's been slow in coming, but we are getting a lot of support now from internally through FWP to make these studies happen, to understand the importance of these other factors in trying to get us where we want to go. The first study, the main study that we really want to do is to understand mortality. So how are fish dying? When are they dying? Why are they dying? And of course, that could be a variety of things. And this study is going to take those things into account. In fact, right before I came here, we just met with the professors at MSU to start to line out some of the parameters of this study to better understand why we're seeing these sorts of declines. And also, really, ultimately, what I want to know is once we know why, to be able then to develop management strategies to help us to mitigate those things. Right now, it's been pretty difficult and frankly quite frustrating because I see population declines, but not really have any good solutions because we don't understand the reason behind their declines. And so we really think this study is going to help us to better understand the causes of mortality that will then help us to better understand and develop management strategies to help us help us get back where we want to be. We know for sure that water is the main driver in the fisheries of the big hole. I mean, years where there's really good water years, the subsequent years of recruitment of juvenile fish that survive during those really good water years tend to carry us through. So in the late 90s, 2011, those years following that, we had big spikes in abundance, and then we see kind of slow, gradual declines as we go into drier periods. We know water is the main issue, but within that framework of we can't make it rain or snow, but are there things that we can do that when we enter drier times through our management that we can mitigate and help us to have not the significant declines that we're seeing right now in trout populations. So typically in the past, we've seen about a 20 to 25% decline in total trout abundance as we go through drought cycles. So the mid 2000s, that's kind of what we see, 20, 25%. We're more than 50% now. So we're dropping way below what we would expect for the amount of water that we've had in the river the last couple of years. So this study is going to really hopefully help us understand why that is and hopefully develop some management strategies to what we can do to mitigate that. So also in that is a disease study that we're proposing to better understand and be able to sample for fish that might be sick, to be able to understand why they're sick, the causes of it, or if disease is even a significant population driver. We all know the disease, we've seen disease fish on the river, so we know that there's something going on there, but is that a physiological response to poor conditions in the river? And that's what's causing the fish to get sick, or is there actually the disease, something else going on that's making those fish be susceptible to any sorts of pathogens that are there? Along with that, there'll be a creel survey going on, so to better understand the types of use that are going on the river, to be able to quantify that, types of gear that are getting used. There won't be any, usually a creel survey quantifies harvest, but there won't be any harvest because that won't be allowed as per our management plan. So also what we're doing right now is we have a new quantitative ecologist on our staff at FWP, super sharp guy, and he's helping us go through a bunch of our past data to develop a model where we can actually manipulate certain things like flow, angling related mortality, or flow related temperature events, those sorts of things, so that we can start to understand what are the significant factors that are linked with at least past data that seem to be associated with driving ups and downs in the population. Like I said, we know water is one of the big ones, but what are the smaller things that we can tease out from that? And then also from that, it's going to help us to understand the things we don't know that we are hopefully going to fill in with that angling mortality study. In addition to that, we're going to do a microchemistry study. This is actually pretty fascinating stuff. If you heard Matt Yeager talk about this on some of his work, where we can take the otolith bones from a fish, they can shoot a laser from it through the otolith bone and be able to determine from different concentrations of different elements where that fish spent its life. So everywhere that fish goes, it's in different water potentially. We're especially looking at tributary streams and their important. What we don't have a really good grasp on the big hole right now is where fish are coming from. In other words, where they're born. We know there's a lot of spawning that goes on in the main river. What we don't understand is the importance of tributary streams to the main river. And so this study will help us. You can go back through and look at the bones of those fish and say, well, this fish started in Trapper Creek, then it moved out to the big hole at age 2 or whatever age it is, or whenever it did that. So we're able to go through and be able to look at that, better understand the importance of tributaries, and this will really help in our management, especially as it relates to spawning habitat, spawning and rearing habitat, if we need to be focused more on tributaries, or if that management needs to be emphasized, continue to be emphasized mostly in the main stem, which is what we've been doing. And I think that was all I was going to say about that. Do we want to talk about more stuff? I was going to switch out of the big hole, the river stuff. So we should talk about, if we want to have questions and talk about the river, we should do that first. French Creek.
All right, finish
that?
Finish that, and then we'll dive into big hole.
Well, yeah. As most of you know, a lot of the work that we've been doing in the past has been focused on native fish restoration. And French Creek, of course, is one of those projects. But I just want you to know, like from our department standpoint and my own personal standpoint, that most of my time is not going to be spent on that anymore. Like, this is our focus. This is what we're really putting a lot of time and effort into right now, is these big hole studies. So I'll be stepping back from a lot of the native fish work and passing that over to Lance Breen, who's the guy who's on the picture with me at the beginning. But so my time and my focus is going to be on these things that I'm talking about here. But you know, you can't switch gears right in the middle of a race, and that's kind of where we're at as far as our native fish stuff. So I just wanted to give you a quick update on French Creek in particular and where that's going. We treated French Creek. Of course, it's a native fish restoration project, about 40 miles upstream of the fish barrier. That was the fish barrier in the previous photo I showed. We treated the stream in 2021 and 2022 with rope known to remove non-native fish, primarily brook trout and some rainbows. And that was the plan. That's what we typically do. It takes at least 2 times of treatment to remove non-native fish. And then subsequently, we go into the watershed and we take eDNA samples. eDNA stands for environmental DNA. So it's the DNA, if you walk through this room, that would fall off of your body. Same with the fish, through cells or however that might happen. So we can go out and pump water, 5 liters of water through a filter. That filter is then analyzed for the DNA of fish. And so in French Creek, we do it every 250 meters going upstream to help us identify, to pinpoint where a fish is. And that's also the sensitivity of the test. If we do it that frequently, we have a very, very high probability, if there's a fish there, to pick up its DNA. So this will find 1 fish in the whole watershed, basically. So this is a map of all those places where we did these eDNA samples, 350 of them. And we send those to a Forest Service lab in Missoula to process them. And of those 53, we had 23 positive hits, or 354. We had 23 positive hits, which sounds like a lot, but I'll explain. I'm not going to go into the science of it that much, but you get a score back on your eDNA. 3 means there was more DNA, 2 a little bit, and then 1, it's very hard to tell whether 1 is real or not. So we had 1 hit of a 3, and that 3 hit also had a 1, 2, and a 1 below it. So we detected the DNA of a fish in there for sure. And we detected that fish at 4 or 5 different locations with the DNA kind of going downstream and becoming less concentrated. And all these little blue ones are 1 hits where we picked up very, very minimal amounts of DNA. And so what our strategy was to retreat every area that we had a positive hit in. So we went back in and strategically treated with rotenone just these very small areas. And we found 1 fish. And that was in the 3 area in Moose Creek right here. And it was exactly where the eDNA said it would be. And then, but we retreated all those areas, and then we actually retested. That's the only fish we found in that whole area. Retested those same areas that had positive hits before and had no DNA of fish in there. So we started to restock the stream with fish. So focus mostly on the tributaries. We're re-eDNA testing again that lower reach tomorrow, actually, of French Creek to verify that it is truly free of fish. But in the tributaries, we started stocking fish last fall. So we stocked 12,000 grayling and 22,000 west slopes in the upper watershed. And what our plan is going forward is to stock in 3 consecutive years. After that time, those fish should be old enough to be reproducing on their own and be self-sustaining. So we're not going to stock beyond that. We may stock grayling beyond that time frame because they seem to like to be stocked as eggs, and we haven't had that capability yet. So we might stock them a few years additional to what we're doing now, just to make sure that they have the best chance of taking off. Our grayling come from our axolotl brood, which is formed from the Big Hole River, and our west slopes also come from our Big Hole brood, which is up in Cherry and Granite Lakes by Melrose. I was just going to mention this, that we have a project proposed. The EA hit the street today for a west slope restoration project in Bryant Creek. Bryant Creek has cutthroat in the very headwater stream up here in Trident Meadows. Most of you, if you live in this area, know that watershed burned 2 years ago. Following that fire, there's a small cascade at the bottom of Trident Meadows right here that kept brook trout out. So it was only cutthroat in about a mile of stream at the very top. And then following the fire last year, we found brook trout all the way to the headwaters. There's maybe 40 cutthroat left. We don't do this project soon. It'll probably be 5 years or less, and that cutthroat population will be completely eliminated. So the Forest Service constructed that fish barrier as showed in the previous slide at the bottom. And our plan is to go into restoration of cutthroat drainage starting this year. Oops, there's the barrier. Also associated with this, we're proposing to stock the Calvert mine with cutthroat. If anybody's familiar with that country up in there, this is a mine that, it was a tungsten mine, but it's in a non-sulfur bearing rock source. So there's not typical problems with metals and mining in this area that we typically see for these sorts of things. So the water quality is good in that mine pit, and there's bugs and stuff in there. And so we're proposing to stock it with cutthroat. I just want to throw this up there that we talk about our overall cutthroat restoration goal is to get to 20% of historically occupied habitat. And in the Big Hole, excluding the Big Hole River itself, that would be 319 miles of stream. And with our cutthroat projects to date, which is this list here plus French Creek, and over the next 5 years, I think we have 8 other projects to do where we're conserving native cutthroat in their existing habitat. That'll add 68 miles. Basically, we'll be more than 3/4 done of getting to 20%. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that we're actually closing in on that goal to get cutthroat back to 20% where they used to be. And then that's it, we're done with cutthroat restoration. So we think the fish will do fine then after that. And I think that's all I had for that. So get back to your Big Hole questions because nobody probably cares about. So you want to?
I'm gonna
navigate this?
Yeah, I'm just gonna pass the mic around.
I believe it was last November, I brought up an idea of having a river steward during Goodall. There's a type of angler, usually a good fly fisher, that arrives from out of the area or out of the state during Goodall. And he kind of flies under the radar, doesn't go to a fly shop. He enters the river in places that he would not necessarily read signage to warn about Goodall. So this person, and again, he's probably a good fly fisher to do this. He doesn't know about Goodall. And he's catching a lot of fish and probably killing a fair number of fish. So I brought up the idea of having a river steward. And Pedro, I think you emailed me, FWP has hired a river steward somewhere in the state. Yeah. Well, it's Yellowstone, anyway. Yeah. Have you given any thought to hiring a river steward? Who knows? Just, I think we have to be proactive on things like this, since there aren't as many fish in the river as there used to be, and this is one area that goes undetected really, and it would be not enforcement but education. He or she would just paddle down the river on different stretches and in a polite way when he's out there fishing when to find what's going on. And
we haven't looked at that in the sense of trying to create that sort of position. But when these Creel folks come on, that could certainly be part of what they do. They wouldn't be paddling down the river necessarily, but they have no enforcement. They have no enforcement capabilities themselves, but they do have an educational part to that where they could tell people, but that exact sort of thing. It wouldn't. Right now, we're proposing to have one Creel clerk full time on the Big Hole the whole summer. So that person would be rotating around to different access sites and things like that. But we haven't looked at having a person just dedicated to that. It could be part of that person's job, that Creel clerk's position to do that, but no, we haven't looked at somebody specifically just for that.
You bring it up and talk about it.
I mean, right now we're looking at data collection and I don't, I guess I would say that would be low on the priority list based on the kind of information that we want to know right now to hopefully better manage the fishery. I mean, being frank, I don't have anything against the idea, but it's going to be low on the priority list given what we've identified as our priorities to understand.
Thanks, Jim. Comment more so than a question. First step in terms of any meaningful recovery is saying that there's a problem. And I think we've reached a point where it's pretty widespread and it's pretty well known now. There's definitely the fishery has declined. And so we can move forward with solutions. And your presentation was great. The managed proposed management plans. Outstanding. Like I said before, I'm disappointed that it didn't get implemented sooner. That being said, moving forward, it's great to hear that you're going to be focusing most of your time on people. And it would be great if there could be more, and the standard did a great job of getting this out there. And I think more people are aware there's a problem on the big hole than before. That we could get some kind of intermittent updates from the department that would help us realize that the talk about doing studies and all these things is really happening. And so we can all have that sense of confidence that the resources that are being promised are actually happening. So thanks again for a great presentation.
Paul, I appreciate you saying that because I think Vanna does a really good job of doing exactly that. And we in the fisheries division have not been very good at, she has an email list of like 300 people that are on it who get her wildlife surveys every year. And we have not been very good at doing that and having that communication piece. It would be a great piece to make sure that the people know that that's what we're doing.
So, I'll hold this here, right?
What has to do with what he's talking about?
Okay, you're on the same.
Yeah, on the same page here.
Same subject.
You know, Jim, Vanna not only does that, but she also gives an update here and there about what's going on out of her office for the last month or so, which is really good to know what's going on.
Far as, what do you mean, like far as people go or?
What you been working on?
Oh,
You know, this last month, and what are some of the upcoming things that they're gonna work on out of the office? And it goes out in the same email as their surveys. But it's very important.
Sometimes we'll pick up on some of those reports and we'll add them to our e-newsletter updates. So, we try to distribute that out, but we don't have, as the watershed committee, don't have like a very clear, what we share and when. If it seems like it's related to the resources of the big hole, we'll try to, and if they're relevant, we'll send them out. But yeah, communications and biologists, that's a thing for sure. Yeah. And then we got.
Yeah, Jim, in terms of your study for the company, how many seasons would you like, or do you think you'll need to come up with some conclusions? And how long is the commitment at this point to supporting your study?
that's a great question. So that's what we met with MSU today, and what they're proposing is a PhD student. So that's at least 4 years of data collection. So that's what we're looking at right now. I don't know if that's going to go through, but that's what we're proposing. And we said we have, everybody's heard a director say that he's going to support that. So
Two or three questions. It's gonna be 4 years before we get a report from this PhD student. If you find there's mortality problems the first year, we're gonna get a report on that, or how's that gonna work?
I would assume so. I don't know how it's gonna work right now.
Sooner to be better.
Right, yeah.
Jim, as long as you
I'm an
talk close to
ex-biologist.
here.
I get the reports from all these wildlife biologists, and I really appreciate it. I don't get anything from fisheries. And I would like to know more of that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We have not been good at that, and I'm not sure how exactly Vanna has, if you walk into our office, there's a piece of paper on the front desk right there that says, if you want wildlife information, write your email right here. And I don't know if we just need to start that. I could start it tonight by putting that together. If people wanted to write down our emails, and if you're interested in that. And I mean, there's a lot of people here tonight, and I don't know how to get that word out better. Actually, it's a great job for the Watershed community is really good at that sort of thing. So
Water is the big thing. The last 5 years I've been watching it. And who's Fish Wildlife and Parks doing, trying to get more water? Who do we work with? DNRC, Fish Wildlife and Parks, Forest Service? How can we get more water in this field?
the people who regulate the water are mostly in this room. DNRC has very little to do with water regulations. They do water rights, but it's the people in this room that are the ranchers that are the ones that really.
I'm talking about producing water in these mountains.
Oh, yeah.
Speak a little bit to that, and it's my sweet spot, it's Ben's sweet spot, is active projects that we know make a difference, whether it's this much of a difference, but we know that the restoration work that we do, we know that it improves habitat, it improves water availability. We see it, and then we have, where we can, we use satellite imagery and actual infrared feedback from satellite images to show us that the grass is greener longer when we do some of the restorations that we do. That's one thing. Vegetation management, our board has talked about for a long time, the amount of trees, the density of trees, and how far down the mountainside they come. We've been actively pushing the Forest Service and the leadership of the Forest Service to do projects for water and measure it and document the returns from doing more active forest management. There's a lot of things that hold up the forest from doing more of that work, but that is their charge, right? So we work on that with the agencies, and we go where there's interest, enthusiasm, and where our resource managers identify problems. A lot of the last 10, 12 years in French Creek, is Jim showing us, hey, there's a sediment problem right here. My fisheries project isn't going to take off unless we fix this. So we go and we fix it. And each one of these projects takes 2 to 5 years from the idea to actually getting it done and completed. So that's, we're not at scale with this stuff. And I would love to be at scale with this stuff, but it really takes way more effort than the three of us and Allie can put together. It's kind of an all-in approach. Just to answer some of that. That's some of the proactive things that are out there. A big giant reservoir in the Big Hole. We've been there. We've talked about it for 40 plus years. It's still out there as an option. We discussed it in February. It's a huge mountain to climb to go that way. And someone would have to sort of be in front of that for the next 10 to 15 years and get me to a pole. Quite frankly, you'd piss everybody off in one way or another. I'm frankly pretty beat up as it is.
Yeah. Jim, I didn't see your upcoming study on the Big Hole, whether you're including water chemistry and microbiology, meaning contamination on the farm.
Yeah, no, that is not part of what we're looking at directly. Yep.
There is the River Foundation does have a long-term study going, and they're doing water chemistry, right? Yeah, they're doing water chemistry samples. It's a state-approved monitoring plan that they put together. In years past, there was an attempt at doing sort of macroinvertebrate study, but it wasn't set up and executed in a way that was defensible with the data. But now these guys, they have a solid monitoring plan in place to try to get at some of those contaminants.
So you could include that for.
Yes, and I think as part of our fish health study would include those data, looking at those and the potential, what they could mean for fish health. You know, that's not my area of expertise. I don't know, like a lot of those answers. That's one of the other studies we're proposing to do as well. It'd be probably through, because we don't have the expertise in Montana to do that sort of thing. This is probably going to come from somewhere else, is to look at that side of things. It's going to be part of the overall fish health study.
And bugs, I mean, obviously, right, that's the bottom of the food chain, so they're looking at bugs, they're getting bug samples. The difficulty and with all ecological research is, what are you comparing to if you don't have a baseline of data to compare to now? You know, it's better than nothing because we're starting, but we really lack a baseline to compare to. Okay. More questions?
I've got another one for Jim.
Okay, we'll go with Scott and then.
Jim, and all your fish surveys are looking, have you noticed any uptick in the whitefish or downtick in the whitefish numbers, or I guess,
Yeah.
are they being affected at all, like, probably?
Right, so, great question. So we started doing whitefish monitoring population estimates about once every 5 years. And so we did it last year in not this spring, but 2022 in Melrose, a very slight decline. But so we've done 3 total. So the whitefish went from here to back down here. So it just looks like this. So we don't have long-term data to say whether, but it's definitely within the range of where it has historically been in the last 15 years. So it's not, the whitefish look okay, I guess is what the ultimate.
So I do have a few questions. You know, they just changed the regulations on the big hole. And they're no longer ones with double hooks or double hooks. How did they determine that a person that's using a spinning outfit was the cause of any dead fish? That's one question. The other question is it seems the regulations are more fit for fly fishermen. And then the other thing is, does everybody in this room think about, what about the young kids? You know, I live up here, so I have grandkids. So, hey, I want to go fishing. They have no idea how to fly fish. So I think it's, you know, there's a lot more to it, but how did they come up with the regulations? And another thing is, who's gonna enforce it? As of right now, I think all we have is Reagan Dean.
Oh, yeah.
See, so how are you gonna regulate it or enforce it? But I think we need to be looking at the younger groups, because you eliminate a little kid using a phantom worm or Rapala or any of it, or even a worm.
I 100% agree. That's not what we put to the commission. The commission made that change for themselves. So let me back up a step. That's not true, because we kept the artificials only section where it has historically been. So from Dickey to Melrose. Our proposal was to have from Melrose to the mouth, not have those restrictions on there. For the reasons of, A, we don't think that's a significant population driver, and B, we would be able to test that if that is the case. Right now, we can't test that at all, because everything is single pointed. It's not barbless. It's just single pointed, no treble hooks, basically, or double hooks.
Yeah, you couldn't use a Rapala, phantom worm, any of them. But, you know, they're saying, well, you could take a Rapala where there's 2 treble hooks and cut them off with a single. Well, they engineered that hook to flow a certain way. But I think that with these regulations, it's all for fly fishermen.
Well,
I think it's totally wrong.
Right, that's not what we proposed. That's what the commission passed, and it's their prerogative to pass whatever they want to. That's not what we proposed.
Well, I think it's more about kids.
I 100% agree. I think we're excluding people from the river, which is not good, particularly those who manage the habitat, which are ranchers who take their kids down there to go fish. And I agree 100%, because I don't think that is a population driver. That is not what's causing the decline.
And by excluding that, we exclude people that also care about the river, and a lot of them also manage the habitat that is around the river. And the more buy-in and help we can get from those folks and everybody else. Like, why should I care about the river if I can't even take my kid down there and fish? You know, that I think that's legitimate.
So if the numbers are showing that they're so low, I propose, why don't they shut it down for a couple of years and figure out what's going on and let the population go? I understand that a lot of the guides, that's their livelihood. I understand that. But if it keeps on going, you know, what are you gonna do? I mean, I live up here and I see it, you know, they close the upper big hole because of the low temperature or the low water, high temperatures. But they're still fishing it, you know, from Jerry Creek down. But then there you go. Who's enforcing that when you have one game warden?
Yeah, my question is that, I think in the regulation is states that any boat that comes over the continental divide is supposed to be inspected before it hits body of water.
From east to west.
So coming from Dillon or Olsen?
No, that's still on the west side. So any boat that comes from the Missouri River drainage to the Columbia River drainage has to be inspected before launching.
Oh,
There are no mussels in the Columbia.
I didn't know mussels could be introduced into the big hole by some of these boats that are not being inspected.
So in order for a boat to get here from out of state, it's got to come through an inspection station from places that have mussels. So they got to come up I-15. Well, yeah, no, that's true too.
Is there nothing on I-15 from Idaho to here? I don't know.
No, oh yeah, there's a right at Kidd, there's a station there. Yeah. Yep. So that's the opposite. So there's no mussels west of the divide. So there's no potential, well, in theory, you know, no potential for them to be introduced from that way.
Well, to your point, I understand where you're coming from, and I feel that. So I take a lot of fishermen fishing, a lot of kids, not a great divide, and I have the single hooks that are inline, the ones you can actually exchange out for the treble hooks, and I'll do that for people and have done it for people many times, and we'll continue to do it. Because I do it, I feel like I don't want to exclude somebody from using a Phantom arm or using it or a Paula, and especially because a lot of those people are younger people, kids sometimes, or not always, but either way, if you came down, I got the good hooks that I can put on your.
Well, we do not have clients who care for responsible, but it's that we don't kids don't know. They don't know how to fly fishing.
Right, so I'll change the hooks out for them and let them go.
But that.
I'll take them, I'll teach them.
Well, I mean, swim is different than the engineering.
Right, and the actual companies on their websites recommend very specific hooks for that, and I have to flesh out. So that's what we do to try to make sure that that's not a problem. So I understand, I don't want to, my spin fishing guys that I've been taking for 25 years, I don't want to, they're not gonna, I'm not gonna change how they're gonna fish, but I can definitely, you know, and do I know if treble hooks make a difference? I don't know that, but if these guys tell me it does and they want to regulate us to the hill, I mean, how many more regulations can you put on the fishermen? We can only float certain sections per day. We can only float with a certain CFS. We don't fish if it's under 68 degrees. I mean, how hard can we get regulated before we have to turn the focus to somewhere else? The fishermen are being regulated unbelievably, and I agree with you. You're right. So what else can we do other than regulate the fishermen to fix this problem?
But if you really think a guy that's Bozeman or Ennis, I'm not just trying to say that follow the rules, because they normally are over in the Yellowstone or the Madison or whatever, so they come over. You don't. Of course, so there's there again.
I agree 100%. I mean, all I can do is what I do is I tell people, hey man, you just leave that over last year. I might, you know, you might want to not do that. I just try to inform people. Of course, I'm not trying to jump down people's throat. I'm not a policeman. I don't want to be the enforcer of anything. I just want to enjoy our resources like I think everybody else does. But yeah, that is an issue. And in terms of like shutting the river down, I mean, that certainly could be an option, but I mean, just in this county being a $168 million driver of this economy, just in this county, I think that would be wildly devastating to people that have jobs and I'm employed hey, I got a lot of employees for this valley.
Oh, I understand.
And-
Here's another thing, Craig. As you know, the value's changing here drastically.
Sure.
On a study from, say, 2015 to the present, how much more pressure has this river gotten? Because I know how the river is, and it's social media, yellow pit area dropping, well, soundcloud drops, it takes attention, they're all coming.
Just one comment to that is I would say, the Madison River has, what, at least 20 times as much pressure? And has at least 20 times as many fish. So fishermen to fish is not the equal. It does not make any sense. Absolutely not. Look at the Madison. It has literally 100,000 more boats than we do. And it has way more fish. So if you correlate the two, I think that there's not enough water, just like Jim just said. I mean, that's clear. That the only thing I've got from every meeting. Correct, but the high water mark didn't even go above 6,000, which normally we hit, as anybody who fishes in here, it hits 8 to 10,000 when we have this much rain. But where is the water going? It's a good question. I don't know. I would love to know. Where's the water?
I can answer the pressure question.
Yeah, Jim, I know Jim's got data on
I did.
pressure.
I did.
Jim, if you could just talk.
Yeah,
closer
I
to
did
the-
include the pressure data, but from roughly 2008, about 30 to 40 or 60,000 angler days, we're at 120,000 now. So we've doubled in 10 or 15 years, doubled the amount of anglers. So one person fishing for one day is an angler day. We were at 60,000, we're now at 120,000. So from 2008 to today. If you run the math on, which is incredible that a fishery can sustain that. If we're at 500 fish a mile in the 74 miles from Dickey Bridge to the mouth, that's 37,000 total fish. 120,000 angler days a year for 37,000 fish. You know, every fish in the river is getting caught. If you guys who fish a lot more can tell me how many fish come into the boat every day, but if every fish person that fishes on the river catches 4 fish, lets them go, every fish in the river is getting caught more than 10 times a year. So like you just run the math, like that's what it equates to.
Just to keep everybody in the barrels. You know,
The Madison is over 300,000. So 3 times the pressure that the big hole gets.
And the Madison has a tap.
And the Madison, exactly, the Madison has good flow
The switch,
all year.
and there's 1,500 CFS of ice cold water.
Exactly. They have not seen the population declines that we have. They're relatively steady on the upstream of Ennis Dam. Pretty much. It's not ice cold, but flows are very steady compared to the big hole. We don't, there's no low flow on the Madison. Ultimately, water is driving the bus.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is maybe shifting lanes a little bit, but water is driving the bus. Back there in the corner.
economic benefit, nothing on a fisherman's valley, valley.
I don't have those numbers specifically. I don't know.
way to find that out or determine that?
I'm sure it could. I don't have those numbers.
There's been, so Headwaters Economics did do a study, I think last year, they put out a paper about the recreation economy, right? And it was really all over across Montana, and it's substantial. And I've talked to those folks, this is one of the things I talked to the folks at PERC about. Tricky part is the Big Hole has 4 counties, and that data is collected at the county level. And so it would take a deeper dive and a much more nuanced look at that data set and where to isolate it, right? We do our data collection in our organization based on arbitrary county lines, not on a watershed basis. It would have been smarter 100 years ago if we had organized ourselves politically and otherwise around watersheds. I mean, it would have, right? Some of these problems would be more notable. We would be able to do things based on the ecosystems and the drainage basins. That totally would have made sense. Now, to get that data specific to a watershed, you'd have to kind of back engineer the data. I think there's folks that can do it. I mean, that'd be a study that I know the committee would we would propose to the committee, if the governing board agreed, that'd be something worth pursuing and find the right economists, social scientists to kind of put that together. I'd love to have that. It'd be really interesting. I think everyone would appreciate having that information. And then it comes down to, I think, just to add, it's a difficult situation because at the end of the day, you're talking about private businesses all disclosing their business, right? It's the same thing with ranchers and irrigators and water. That's their private.
So have you looked at, what do they do down there in Arizona, California, where their reservoirs are going dry? You know?
Yeah. So with the compact, with what they're trying to do, right? I mean, one thing to keep in mind, that Colorado system is full of reservoirs. That didn't really solve the problem. So we got to keep that in mind when we think about maybe a reservoir in the big hole as the solution, right? The silver bullet thing doesn't always work out. One of the things they're doing, they're paying for water. So I know there's a resident of the lower big hole that has a place in Wyoming that he is not ranching anymore. It's really just a conservation kind of wildlife property. He's getting paid $500 an acre foot for all the water he does not use and leaves in the river. He's getting paid from way downstream users, right? And this is where some of these market-based ideas come from. The water banks that are happening internationally, Nature Conservancy and others have done these. Usually what you see is a highly concentrated urban population of water users, and then a sparse population of headwaters, rural folks that are managing the headwaters. They're getting compensated for land management practices that benefit the overall availability of water downstream, right? That's kind of the market mechanisms that we know are out there that have worked well in other places. In our case, that would be going to the city of Butte and asking every water user in the city of Butte to chip in for headwaters conservation from the folks that are taking it, right? And that's an idea. It's not one that the governing board has considered, but that is one example of some of the things that are out there. Another thing they're doing in Arizona, they're kicking the Saudis out, who are deep well pumping from 400, 500, 600 feet deep to grow alfalfa, because in Saudi Arabia, they can't grow alfalfa. It's against the law because they don't have no water. So they were coming down to Arizona, growing their alfalfa to ship back to Saudi Arabia. And the state of Arizona has now just kicked those folks out because water's getting precious. It all gets real complicated real fast.
Just to follow up on the gentleman you were talking about from Wyoming, what happened to the property? Did he subdivide it or what?
No, he's parking everybody's problem out on his price. Just for a while.
Well, if you take the water away from the land, the grazing purposes can't be very good.
Yeah. That's just, I mean, the solution that is driving, I guess the driving solution is just money for water. That's, you can summarize it, that's what's going on. You got headwater, you got a water right, I'll pay for it, that is.
No,
That's happening in the rest of the drier part of the.
and it's going to come back to haunt you. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, that's. Yeah.
Just want to provide a little perspective. The Melrose gauge is in my yard at the ranch. My great grandmother manually started measuring the water back in, I think, 1928 for the USGS. We've done it our whole lives until I went to telemetry in the 90s. But prior to that measurement, we've got journals going back to the 1870s. And during the late 1890s and early 1900s, rainfall was much higher in that area. And yet
it was common in the early 1900s for the river to essentially dry out. What they would talk about was in the journals, it was, you could walk across the river in your loafers and not get your feet wet. Starting about the late 1920s, early 1930s, as the rainfall, annual precipitation decreased, those days began to go away. We didn't have the dry days where you could get across the river with your feet dry. And the reason was, the best as we can tell, was the advent of the tractor, the Caterpillar. Because at that time, everybody in the upper big hole was laying out ditches and they were spreading water across the landscape, in effect, creating a larger riparian zone. And that water percolated into the river and kept the river up all year. Since 1920, I think there were 3 times when the river got pretty low. I believe the 2 lowest were 1967 and 1988. We've had a couple periods around 2005, and I think in the last couple of years, where we had water cycles and snowfall that should have put us back in one of those positions. But due to ranchers who are putting water back in the river, due to our flood irrigation, we maintain flows. Water temperatures are getting a little higher, maybe the summers are getting a little hotter. We're trying to get riparian vegetation back to help with cooling. But we can't fix the drought cycle. It happens, but we've done a pretty good job. And I'm not saying we can't improve it, but ranchers are giving up a lot. And I know the guides and outfitters are in a pinch now too, just like we are when there's a drought. So I'm hoping we can figure out what the problem behind this fishery issue is, but it's not just water.
Yep, can I speak to that a little bit, Eric? What we're seeing, and I mentioned this a little bit for trout numbers now, it's below what we would expect for the amount of water we have in the river. There's something else going on. It's not just water that's got us where we're at. Water's the overall like big driver, but there's something else going on right now that we don't understand that's put us way lower than what we would expect given our low water. Yep, like 2 years ago, not this last summer, but the last summer before, yeah, the water flows, given precipitation, were way better in Melrose than they were historically in '88. Some of these really dry years, way better. And we still saw declines. In fact, our populations declined in these 2 water years were above average. So, and we were still seeing the population go like this, even though we had above average flows for those waters, not big flows, but above average. So there's something else going on. Just like Eric said, it's not just water. There's something else that we're trying to understand.
And that's something that Norbert put together for us a couple of years ago, where he looked at precip. He took sort of all of the years over the last 25. I've got the graph. I've put it up here a bunch of times over the years. He took like 15 years that were about at 100% of average and looked at compared stream flows to precipitation, and late season stream flow was up regardless of declining precip. And I think that is a testament to kind of what the governing board here has been doing since '88, which is trying to create an all-in model where everybody's kind of eating it when it gets bad and everyone's giving up what they can. We've tried to document that the way we can, but I guess that data that I've seen seems to corroborate what Jim's saying. Next year, all right.
Actually, for some of for the ranchers, you can maybe help me answer. I've been guiding here for 25 years. I've seen a switch over to a lot more, like used to be the day got cut twice, you'd see the river bump twice, it's always been the same thing that you'd see every single year. They would go down, they would go up, you know, that kind of situation. So recently in the fall, I guess I've seen when the hay goes down for the last time. I don't see the bump in the river. I'm just wondering, is there a lot of irrigation going on beyond the last cut? Or is there a difference? Is there something else going on? We don't know about. I mean, I'm just asking, 'cause I'm not usually in the room with you guys, so it's the question.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I was gonna ask. The last 2 years, the river is a lot healthier today than it was in the last 2 years. So the drought. So when it was a drought year, so do you think the fish got killed last year, the year before, the little ones? And the population went down because the river was hot? I see your chart there, but in the last few years, if we're in a drought year, with the smaller fish, they would probably die off.
Right.
And now you did a study for this year. Or, you know,
These are the smaller fish that were made here. So the drought conditions, which weren't terrible in 2021, we're seeing those fish right here for the first time. So we're a 2-year delay. So this coming spring, we'll see what happened in 2021, right? So when that. Get my math right? 0, 1, 2. Yeah. So we do zeros too.
oh,
0, 1, 2. Yep.
By the 15th of August. Normally I'd run it till the 15th of October. So I think everybody is responding and giving everything they can.
And we certainly get calls every time we put out a notice to cut back on irrigating. We get calls from ranchers saying, what do you mean? I'm giving everything I can. There's nothing left. Right. I mean, when the tributary, when the tap runs dry, there's nothing coming down in July and August.
Yeah, so I live on the upper part of the river. In the last 2 years, there's just nothing left at the end of the year, and we've got forest fires and it's basically drought. But I think Eric's comment on the flood irrigation, I mean, that's what we're doing right now is we've got the fields flooded. We've soaked up the sponge. It'll last, when we shut it off, it'll last for a period of time, but if there's no more water coming down, there's not a lot that can be done.
Question for you, Jim, getting back to the brown trout. You were talking about you trying to leave them younger ones alone under 2 years of age. How the heck do you sort them out?
So they're not out in the river with everybody else. They're hiding in the banks and in the brush. They're not out with other fish. Like we don't see them. Like they're just not there. So when we come to brush piles that are in shallow water, we don't shock them. Because if we do shock them, all we do is pull out little fish like this. And if we put those in the tank with a whole bunch of other big fish, they tend to get beat up basically and will die. So we don't target, so we just don't see them. It's not that they're not there. We purposely avoid them because it's really hard on them.
And that happens during drought years too, where they concentrate in the pools.
That's what we think is one of the main drivers between why fish survival is poor during dry years is those margins of the river, which those little fish use, dry up. So those little fish become concentrated with the big fish and they're whatever the mechanism is, they don't survive as well. Assuming they probably get eaten by them or birds or whatever else. They're not able to hide as well.
Question on the mortality of fish when you're shocking. What is the percentage and does it affect the big ones more or the little ones or how does it work?
As far as, does our shocking mortality affect big ones?
Average.
I'd say less than, well, we don't immediate mortality less than 1%. 1 in 300 fish that will die in our tanks. It's very, very low. We shock in March. Water's ice cold, fish are very concentrated, they're fairly easy to catch. And contrary to what people, we usually don't stun any fish except for whitefish. They come to the boat and they're still swimming at the boat. We scoop them up, put them into the tank, and they're not stunned at all.
I thought the grayling that here in the up in the big hole, there was a different species of winter mammals, because that was bluegill, and that was up in the music book. And then when you get high water, if it's water, goes grayling.
Out of Music Broad? Yeah, so the grayling in the big hole are fluvial, and they so add fluvial, the ones that are in the lake, so they live in the lake and then go spawn in the creek. And there is very, very little exchange. Like Music Broad grayling are genetically distinct from big hole grayling. They're not the same fish. They are the same fish, but genetically, they're not the same. Very few of those fish that come out of Music Broad ever mix with the fish that are in the big hole, the main river. They might spill out a few, but they don't. By mixing, I mean interbreeding. They don't breed together. So the fish that are in the big hole are from the big hole. We don't see very many fish spilling out of Music Broad or Mine or Pintler or any of those lakes that have grayling that mix with the main stem river.
Years ago, been back for for miners union day. The hatchery over in Anaconda off the river.
Yes.
That's where everybody can catch fish.
Yes.
About 10 days.
Yeah. The fascinating thing about that, not that we want to get down the grayling hole, but all those fish that came from Anaconda came from Georgetown Lake, and Georgetown Lake, they were formed from the red rock. None of those, or very, very few of those fish ever survived to breed in the big hole. The big hole is still the big hole. Genetically, it looks nothing like the red rock. So even though there was, I mean, it was millions of grayling they stocked every year in the big hole, and none of those survived to reproduce with big hole grayling. It's just fascinating that you can stock over a period of 50 years, probably 50 million grayling, and not have any of them survive. Like the big hole fish are still the big hole fish. They do not look like red rock fish genetically. But that's where all those fish came from, was from Georgetown to Anaconda, and then from Georgetown they came from Red Rock Lakes up on the refuge. So.
Any other questions?
Good enough.
Not really hearing anything. Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Wish you luck on the studies. Well, folks, I guess that concludes our meeting. After Jim, can we give him a round of applause, please?
Yeah, my name is Mark. I would be remiss if I didn't say something. My grandfather was Joseph A. Brown, who built a toll bridge on the Big Hole. So I've been around a while, our family has. And we ranch both in Montana and Idaho. And the value of water down the road is going to be unbelievable. To the point we'll be very lucky as a community to have any water. Because it's going to be worth so much money. It'll be taken off the land. Actually, it was taken out of the river on the land, and it can go back just as fast. In 1900, the records at Western Montana College, there was about 16 inches of rain a year, and we've lost 0.6 of an inch every decade till we're there at about 10, 9, something like that. So, you know, we are in a drier cycle. You know, compared to everything that's been going on. But Idaho is a lot more progressive than Montana. But they got a lot of dams, and we don't have any dams in the Beaverhead, or the Big Hole, excuse me.
Of course, the Madison has a dam and that makes a big difference. But we've been horrible in managing the watershed yield from the watershed. In that's directly related to the 1910 fires and the Endangered Species Act of NEPA and the environmentalists stopping the Forest Service and the BLM every time they want to do some management on the resource. And that has a huge impact. That's where most of our water is. Those trees use some, but most of it evapotranspires back up into the clouds. So all our water comes from precipitation. All that water that you see in the river out there now starts with a drop of rain or a flake of snow. It's hard to believe when you look at the river. But we can do a lot of things, and we can start standing up and for the Forest Service and standing up against those environmentalists, extremists who are using NEPA and the Endangered Species Act to as a business model to make money by suing the federal government using equal access to justice. That's exactly what they're doing. There's only about 5 or 6 of them. We need to stop them so we can start managing our watershed yield. But it's taken since 1910 to get to where it is. It's taken 100 years to get it back where it should be. That's a long-term solution, but there's a lot of water up there. Off-stream storage is something that we should certainly look at, and it's viable, but it runs into the same folks who are putting their foot down on that. Groundwater storage, it's unbelievable. In Idaho, they use off-season flows running out in those canals, and they put down up to 570,000 acre feet a year into that Snake River aquifer.
Hi, baby. No, ma'am.
And if you talk to the School of Mines, there's places around here, I'm sure we could do something like that. The other issue is cloud seeding. Power has 2 seeders on us, and the Upper Snake, they generate about 257,000 acre feet down to the Milner Dam that we're talking about, Idaho Power. That's after everyone from Henry's Fork down to the Milner Dam uses them. They're cloud seeding and they're getting that done, and they're to the point where it only costs them $3.20 an acre foot. That's unbelievable. And cloud seeding can be very viable. It's better for storage, but it's the cloud seeding is for high mountain snowpacks that'll come out later in the year. And this group and myself in particular have been fighting Eastern Montana cowboys in the conservative over there in regards to cloud seeding. We had a wonderful law in '67 and in '88 they thought that North Dakota was stealing all their water. Of course, that's when the park was burned, and we'll get it done, but it's going to be a long road. We need to get the final decree done on the Big Hole, so we know who owns what. The problem is the court's not done with it yet, and then you got 50 years worth of permits you got to work into the final decree before you can start measuring that water accurately. It's extremely important to measure that water for all uses, but especially irrigation. Because I'm sure there is some water uses over and above what they have a right to that water to the river. As you all recognize, sprinkler irrigation has come in, thank God. It's not economically feasible in the upper basin, or you wouldn't have it in the lake fall. But around Melrose, around Glen, we're starting to go to sprinkler irrigation. So when you have your crops in, you shut your water off because it costs a lot of money to pump it. So you don't have any groundwater storage. So there's a lot of things we can do to make a difference. But it'll take a concerted effort and it's going to take quite a long time to do it. But we got to manage those flakes of snow and drops of rain that fall on the watershed. And just so you know what I'm talking about, we have a spring in Idaho. It runs, there's a 650 acre watershed. And so we capture all the water in the spring when we spray that watershed, I've done it twice in my life, I won't get to do it again. But we increase the flow of that spraying from a gallon a minute to 15 gallons a minute, which is 11,000 acres, 11,000 gallons a minute, or 20 acre feet a section. That's how much water you're losing because of, or that's how much water you can gain with vegetative manipulation. And that's in sagebrush. The trees are a lot different. They take more. There's light at the end of the tunnel, but by God, we've got to go get it. And thank you for your concern for everyone. This is a wonderful group.
Thank you, Jim.
No rumble strips, and I promise to be civil.
Frank, this has to do with you. I just want to kind of touch base. First thing I'm going to tell you, you said your piece, I respect you for it. Don't agree with it, but I respect you for it. I just want to talk to you about the 27 CFS, and I'm only going to talk about the big hole. I don't know nothing about the beaverhead. There was a little bit more water than that in the big hole. And I'll tell you what, you as an outfitter know there are fishing holes in that big hole. And that's where some of them animals ended up.
That was very.
No, not at first you weren't.
See the real conversation. I'd be happy to come over and give it to you.
Well, I might have to.
The exact right. Several of my friends, people that are higher or children, that could work for me. I've never had a problem with going down my road because I was upset that, number one, I've seen the county. I contacted the county, so just try to get somebody to. I contacted the city. Nobody did. I contacted right here because I'm not. I never said that. There was one time. Why?
Did you try going to the landowner themselves?
I didn't know that. Well, those are changed. I can talk to the kid.
Well, that's neither here nor there. I can honestly say, I was downright mad at first. And then as I kept reading the comments, I mean, I got to thinking about it. You know, I've been going to meetings for 40 years. I've got cohorts here that have been going to meetings a hell of a lot longer than that. Seems like about every 10 years, we're supposed to educate you people on how we do things. Okay, the ones that were backing you that don't know anything about agriculture, but by God, they'll sure step in and write their own blog. You can. Well, we're not going to get into an argument tonight, people.
Yeah, please.
But
Yeah.
all right, people, we're not going to argue tonight.
Yeah, that's.
Me to say that.
I can't be peacekeeper.
Hey, people. Let's just, yeah, okay, there you go.
That's, there's 100 of those one-on-one conversations.
Yeah, well, all I'm gonna say, and we got a good diversified bunch of people here. I'll tell you what, the ranchers, we went through hell this winter. And there isn't a single rancher in this basin that didn't work for what they had to. Heck, I know a couple ranchers, 500 head outfits. They lost 40% of their cap drops. I mean, it was hell, but we don't need to go through stuff like that, Craig. Well, all you have to do is go talk to somebody. And then as far as you saying there was only 4 inches of water, there was no way. There was animals lost right up in the Wise River. There was no way you could get them out because that damn ice stayed there till the end of April and then went right to high water. And I'll be darned if any of these people should have to go in there safety wise, and try to get them up. I mean, I'm not gonna touch the beaver head. I don't know anything about it, but. Well, you were there at first, Craig. But we'll leave it at that. I just wanted to.
So I put on social media, you know what, that was approved 2 days later.
So,
That's what it takes to get something done.
well,
Sucks, but that's just what a lot of.
so to conclude, thank God we didn't have social media in 1988. When this group came together. Well, we old.
Well, I've been dealing with this place. I've been dealing with this place before 1988. Okay. I used to yell with Randy's dad, with Eric's dad. I used to fight and argue. I don't know, was it 95 or 96? I don't remember what year was it. Everybody had enough. We had to get together. 95. So we sat up here and argued and fought, and then we finally said, hey, this isn't gonna get us anywhere. You just gotta work at it a little bit, make some agreement. I'll tell you what, 88, this river went dry. We've had a lot tougher years than 88 since then. Because of this group, it hasn't gone dry. It may not be that good, but it hasn't gone dry. You know, we can always improve on things. You know, we hear a lot about this off-stream storage. We tried. Don't let off-stream storage is gonna happen on this river or in this basin. Is that the people in Helena decide they wanna do it. Because it's such a damn big project and all the hoops you gotta jump through. They're the only company around that's big enough to do it. So go talk to your legislature, talk to your governor. If you're worried about off-stream storage, because most don't even talk about it until they decide they want to do something about it. Okay? That's all I got to say.
But, you know, to conclude, it takes hard work. And it takes showing up all the time. I really appreciate the guys, the outfitter community, folks that I haven't seen in this room for a long time. We really appreciate you showing up today. But when we have meetings about weeds, when we have meetings about elk, when we have meetings about all the other subjects that we touch on, come. Because these conversations continue and we all get better educated about our resource. We all learn a little bit more. The science leads. And then we do what we can based on that understanding. That's been the whole model. And I really appreciate that today. I feel like we've reaffirmed the importance of this and coming together face to face, talking stuff out. This is how we're going to get it done. This is how we kind of move the ball forward. It's not pretty. This sucks for everybody. I mean, when a guy like Dave Ashcraft calls me in the middle of winter and says, this is hard, I want to give up. I mean, you know, they're having a hard time in the winter. Like that's tough. And I feel for him the same way I feel for you guys now with the pinch in the fishery and your businesses, right? And we all do. Nobody's denying the humanity of the situation, but look for the silver lining to where we can make some progress. Work on, you know, our problems should be the bureaucrats and the money and getting through that. Get the money, get through the red tape, get projects done, and make incremental improvements to the river. It's a long haul and it's about the resource, right? So I appreciate all of y'all that came and spent time tonight with us. This is kind of what it's all about. And I'm so hesitant to give this thing.
You know, talking to John Costa, who is our man that picks up all the deads. We got that compost site up there by Lisbon. What would it take for this group, after him telling me this story? I'll start with the story. We didn't get that dump truck this year because it was stuck in a snowbank down in the Centennial. Why can't we get some kind of a grant to go buy our own truck and keep it here? Why do we have to have money just for reclamation and this and that? I mean, why can't we do something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's, yeah, we're gonna get at that. Lesson learned. Tana, you wanna go?
First of all, there aren't a lot of grant sources for carcass removal or conflict reduction in general. There are millions of dollars out there for restoration and reclamation, but for conflict reduction, it's pretty much the Livestock Loss Board. And there's a couple other grants, they're very sporadic. So that's a good idea, but it's a little bit easier said than done, and dump trucks are expensive.
Why can't you put it under wolves or grizzly bear? There's lots of funding for that.
Send me a link to that funding. No, but that is a good idea, Mark, and that's something that we will look into. The dump truck and getting it out of the valley sooner is something that has been done in the past and will be done in the future. There's a new management of the refuge, and I did contact them in November, and they kept kind of saying, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you. And then suddenly it was all the trucks snowed in. So that's kind of on me for not just pushing them harder and saying, you know, no, we really need to do it now before the truck gets snowed in. So I'll make sure to keep on them with that.
Well, you have something else going on too, like having a baby.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But yeah, all of your points are well taken, and we'll make a point to get that dump truck sooner and to look for additional funding and maybe get our own dump truck. FWP did come through for us this year and gave us a trailer with a ramps and a winch that's kind of on loan as long as we need it.
I'd like to come unload the deads that I could send up there.
Do you have some?
Oh, boy.
I'll send John down. I'm not gonna do it.
Me and John already talked about it.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to do it, just leave it crap. When we get this dump truck.
Because there's too many for the trailer, or because it's too hard to get them with a winch? Or both?
Want to deal with maggots?
Well, I don't want to deal with any of it. That's why we have John. But that's good. Thanks, Brian.
I just know we gotta do a better job on that. You just tell me, what do you want to dump truck? You know, that's what we're going to go to San with dump truck.
I would never have guessed that we would have ended tonight on carcasses. I'm so glad that we're talking about carcasses right now. I had a million other scenarios that could have gone down. I appreciate everybody here. Are we done?
Mark Robert Jackson was the one that this has to do with everybody we know. He said making a living or making money off of the resource. If you're gonna make money off of Mother Nature, plan on her biting or something every once in a while. And that's what happens.
And with that, see you guys in August. We do not meet in July. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Drive safe.